You hate the mainstream media, huh?
Look, I don't hate the mainstream media. I think what they do is important. I resent the mainstream media in a way that's almost not their fault, but sometimes is, because they've engaged in so much both sides coverage that I think it's normalized a lot of, it's gotten us to this point that we're in right now. But also at the same time, I think that the responsibility is on the left more broadly, the amorphous left more broadly, to have embraced independent media earlier and not look at mainstream media as our message distribution system, because they're not, and they never wanted to be. And they've told us that they don't want to be our message distribution system. And the right was really good at standing up independent outlets or avowedly right-wing outlets. They have Daily Wire, Daily Caller, Megyn Kelly, Alex Jones, Tucker Carlson, Fox, Newsmax, OAN. Fox's slogan was fair and balanced, not because they viewed themselves as fair or balanced, but because they viewed themselves as a balance to what they considered a liberal media ecosystem. And so they were the right-wing balance to that. And so you have all these avowedly right-wing outlets working to help the Republican Party. And on the left, we have the New York Times that doesn't want to be liberal media. And in fact, when somebody calls it liberal media, they do 77 cover stories on Hillary's emails to show us, hey, we don't want to be your message distribution system. And so I have resentment because that was all we had. But it should never have been all we have. And look, I think I wouldn't be able to do what I do without the great reporting that legacy media brings about. But I also think having people who have a perspective, who are biased in favor of a progressive agenda, as I am, I think it's important that we invest in that space as well as a counter to what they have on the right.
I see, though, what was being attempted by the mainstream media in pursuing the idea of objectivity. What you're saying is true. The both sides of it in this age doesn't work anymore because it's side-taking time and it feels like cowardice. The neutrality doesn't feel right given what it is that's happening. But the starting point on the aspiring to that objectivity is trying to be fair. Like the attempt, and the New York Times has fallen apart for a lot of different reasons over the last 5 years, but it's the strongest thing standing in the space, still trying to govern, still trying to fight for something that in its principles, I think, while utopian, I still think the principles are good. Trying to be fair is the attempt, but it doesn't work anymore.
No, it doesn't work anymore. And also we know, like, you have to be able to call a spade at some point. Like the both sides coverage, when it manifests in like the election denialism, basically transcribing what Trump is saying about election denialism and refusing to take a position when it's very clearly election denialism. Like, I can't abide that, And so I think there are a lot of outlets that are still afraid, whether it's because their leadership is right-wing or they want to curry favor with this administration, not get iced out, that they will refuse to call what is black and white exactly what it is. And so we'll see, like a feud erupts over election denying candidates when they can just say the election was not stolen. There's no evidence of widespread fraud, but we keep getting what feels like transcribing politicians, their words, as opposed to doing the reporting and the journalism of being able to say, whatever it is, the election wasn't stolen.
What do you make, and how concerned are you about all of the infighting on the left?
It's concerning because we're at a moment right now where we are facing like an existential crisis as far as democracy is concerned. We have a president that is willing to use the military as his personal cudgel within the United States, who's willing to use the FCC as a way to silence his critics, including comedians, who's willing to undermine the plain text of the Constitution. Right now, he's fighting against birthright citizenship, which is right there in black and white in the Constitution. So he has no adherence or fidelity to the Constitution or our laws, and yet he's content to not only wield power, but consolidate more power, and his party seems perfectly willing to let him. So all of those things are happening, and obviously infighting hurts our ability to be able to unite against a shared enemy in this moment. I think to a lot of the moments in history where we had autocrats, the countries falling from liberal democracies to illiberal democracies. And, I think a lot of us, especially in the political space, pose this question to ourselves where we ask, like, what would we do if we were there? What would we do if we were in, 1933 Germany? What would we do? And I would want to make sure that I was clear-eyed about fighting, that existential threat and not engaging in infighting and squabbles. But it's hard to take a 30,000-foot view to things sometimes because politics is, people get passionate about it, and rightfully so. So what I hope is look, this is a primary. There's going to be infighting. That's just how it goes. We're a big tent party. That is a double-edged sword. And I hope that people understand the existential threat that we're contending with and can drop the internal disputes when the time comes and just start focusing on what we have to do moving forward.